But if you can we give a warm welcome to my friend Kevin Carnes? You got it.
Hey, y'all. I'll pick that back up in a second. Maybe. What y'all think? Think it's gonna make it?
Hey guys, some of y'all know me by Katie's dad, but my name's Kevin Carnes, as Hugo just said. Can we do one thing real quick? Can everybody stand up? Can we have like 5 seconds of running in place? I feel like everybody in this place needs to wake up. Y'all, I'll do it with you. Come on, everybody. Got a little blood flowing? Got a little blood flowing. Somebody put the extra mile literally? Okay. Y'all feel better? Everybody a little bit more awake? Cool. Thank you. So my goal here tonight is mainly 2 things. Yes, I'm giving my testimony, my story, why I am who I am now, what I went through to get here. But the second thing is, I've prayed hard about this. I really, at y'all's age, I remember being in the youth group, right? And people told you to read the Bible. Everybody been told to read the Bible. How do we get 12, 13, 14, 16, 17-year-olds to want to read the Bible? To not just read, like my grandma used to say, some words, but to understand that they are reading the Word. The inspired Word of God, written and commanded by our Father. And there is a passage in the Old Testament that, as I read it, I couldn't get off of it a few years ago. And I kept going back to it. And I related to the main character in this story incredibly. But my goal is that the Word will somewhat become alive. That it's not just something y'all do on Sundays or your parents make you read it, right? That you look for yourself in it. The Old Testament is a little bit different than the New Testament, right? New Testament is Jesus revealed, grace and mercy personified, Paul getting writer's cramp because he wrote a lot, right? But the Old Testament is snapshots of who God is. He shows us his character through stories. He teaches us who he is. And he uses people like a guy I'm going to tell y'all about tonight. He used this passage in 2 Samuel to bring real life into what I went through as a child. So, first and foremost, 2 Samuel chapter 4, verse 4 says, Jonathan, Saul's son, had a son who was lame in his feet. He was 5 years old. Basically, his feet was broke, y'all. Feet didn't work. When he was about 5 years old, when the news about Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel, and his nurse took him up and fled. And it happened as she made haste to flee, that he fell and became lame in both of his legs. His name in the Greek, or name was Mephibosheth, and his name in the Greek actually translates to the dispeller of shame that will come up. So when I read that at first, it sounded like, okay, some people did some stuff, somebody's legs got hurt, right? Well, let's take this, like, go back, read a little bit, figure out what's going on here. What's the context? So the backdrop to this is when David, y'all, everybody's heard of King David? Yes. Okay. We got one adult and 2 people. I've really got buy-in right now. We're going to get better, y'all, I promise. When he became king finally, and Saul and Jonathan died during the battle where David took over, the nanny assigned to take care of this little guy named Mephibosheth, who was Jonathan's son, tried to flee the reign of David. And it was customary in this time that if there was a new king, that they would seek out all the lineage of the old kingdom. So if anybody was still alive that could later on claim rights to that throne, I mean, it's Old Testament, y'all, they cut the head off. They took care of it, right?
Yes.
This way, they wouldn't have the ability to claim any kind of rights to the throne later. So, but when the nurse heard about this, the word says she made haste. That means girl was in a hurry. She picked up little 5-year-old Mephibosheth and started running. And girl got her head in front of her feet and fell. And when she fell, she dropped this little 5-year-old boy. It broke his legs. I can relate with that. If there was a title to this, I would probably name it I Was Dropped. I've always really felt somewhat dropped. Anybody ever felt dropped? Ever felt like you were hurt at no fault of your own? Right? My dad was apparently, my biological father was apparently a little bit of a hustler and a player. So he was married. This is pre-internet, y'all. This is pre-y'all. He was married to 2 different women in 2 different states at the same time. And when my mom was 8.5 months pregnant, he left and didn't come back. And the seed of rejection was birthed in my life before I was even breathing. I never met him, and my mom got remarried about the time I turned 7, okay? My new dad, he changed very quickly after they got married. The abuse started pretty slow. Started out with him putting cigarettes out on my back. Before long, I began being disciplined with the dog crate on the back porch. Sometimes in the winter, in my underwear. All of this happened while my mom was either at work or not there. And I held it all inside of me, and I didn't tell anybody. I became that kid in school that always had long sleeves on. No matter what time of year, I never fit in. I never felt loved. I never loved myself. Before long, it developed. My closet rod in that old house was the strongest closet rod in the house. And some of y'all that live in some of these old farmhouses will understand it's like your uncle hung a new closet rod. It's got those little wood pieces on both sides and a big round bar. That's what my closet rod was. And his favorite game became telling me to grab my belt. And he would hang me from that closet rod. And he'd get right in my face and laugh and count out loud to see how long I could maintain consciousness. And eventually, he'd untie me. And again, I'm dropped. This crippled a young boy at 7 years old. So do you understand why I can relate with this guy named Mephibosheth? At no fault of his own, a young boy was hurt and dropped by the person that's supposed to take care of him. We finally moved back in with my grandma years down the road. It's about 4 years of that cycle. And, fast forward a little bit, I was probably 11 or 12 or so, roughly, when I moved back to this area. Moved in with my grandma, and her prayers kept me alive. I honestly believe that later on in this timeline. But about y'all's age, probably the rough median of this group here, about 14, I took part in the youth group pool party, which means I got baptized and everybody else did, right? Just because everybody else was. And I wanted to fit in. And if y'all don't have to raise your hand, but I'll guarantee you that 99% of y'all have felt that feeling. You do something because everybody else is doing it. But it also applies the opposite way. You don't do something because everybody's not doing it. When you're in the middle of worship, and I gotta say this, guys, just because nobody else around y'all has tears in your eyes and their hands are in the air, doesn't mean y'all don't have to. It doesn't mean that these lights have to be on. That even this sound machine, all this stuff doesn't have to be there. The only thing that has to be there is the theme of that last song, which is surrender and your praise. Literally, there's a revival taking place in Kentucky right now that they're playing a drum, a cajon, with no sound system. All it takes is surrender, the posture of your heart, and your praise. God can change an atmosphere quickly. And your surrender is contagious. How many times have y'all seen on Sunday morning, or even in y'all's youth group, when one person comes to this altar, usually there's people that follow. It's time for this generation to be the leader. Back to this, sorry, sidetrack. So I developed a need for validation, and I kind of rode the wave of acceptance. Honestly, I just desperately wanted to be loved. I just wanted to feel loved, like we all do. We're created to be loved. And here's the tricky part about it is we are, and we don't accept it because we don't see that we're worth of it. Later on, I found out that I was pretty good at running my mouth, getting my own way, right? Looking back, though, I've realized that I spent a whole lot of time talking and never really communicated anything. I dropped out of college to pursue my partying career. Really? Nobody got that? That's for the people in the back. But I chased acceptance, just realizing now that I was just silencing the screams of a 7-year-old little boy that was hurt. Anything I could. I got married and had Caden. But at this point, life was still pretty manageable. But, see, the devil's not real smart, but he's consistent. He'll come at you with a generational curse just at the right time to keep it going. Right when I thought everything was okay, I had a back surgery for growth that had developed around my spine, the base of my spine. And off to the races I went. I was prescribed 80 milligram Oxycontins, quite a bit of them a day. And, it seems like I got promotion after promotion and raise after raise, but I eventually became, one of those regional corporate guys. But here's the thing. The wages of sin is death. And this doesn't necessarily apply to what we originally think it means, that we're going to physically die. We mentally die. We spiritually die. We emotionally die. Everything honestly became a blur during those years of my life. Caden's mom threatened to leave me, so I went to rehab. But recovery only happens when it's done out of honesty. Your relationship with God only will grow when it's done out of honesty. He don't want the fake. He don't want the fake. He wants the real you. He wants you to get in tune with the one he created. So he can lead you and guide you. He wants the best for you. So, and honestly, I had went to rehab out of a place of manipulation just to try to make everything good again, right? You know, the walls were crumbling around me. But God had begun something. And he's still, you know, thank God he's still working on me because I ain't perfect. This place that I went to was totally different than anything I had ever been around. They would hoop and holler and clap and raise their hands. And I was raised in a little Southern Baptist church where everybody's checking out how much somebody's tie costs. You know what I mean? You don't bring your kids in there and, you know, be quiet, iron your pants, all that good stuff. I sat in the back real quiet and just watched. But something happens when you're in the atmosphere of praise. And slowly God began to change things about me. I started scooting further and further up toward the front. I stopped cussing like I used to. I didn't want to hang out with some of these people that didn't really care about the reason why they were trying to make their life better. Why they were where they were. So the last class that I went through at this place was called Inner Healing. And we did an exercise one day where you go back into your childhood, right? To forgive the ones that have hurt you. And up until this moment, I was 29 at the time. I had not fully really remembered what had happened to me in Durham. But there is a difference between knowing what the roots are in your life and actually digging them up. Working on getting them out. So over time, you know, Caden's mom decided not to stay. We got a divorce. And it was just me and Caden for a long time. And I'm, you know, very thankful for those years. I joined a little Christian band called Kingdom 33. We traveled and played at churches and high schools and little tent revivals and stuff. You know, Caden was always right there with me. The word says to raise a child up in the way. And when they're old, they won't depart from it. And y'all know Caden now. She's at Liberty. Doing worship leading and studying, hopefully to become someone that can help kids like I was, which is pretty amazing. So fast forward a couple years, I saw a picture of this cutest little girl in a camo hat one day, and I was like, yeah, she's a yes, right? So I swiped right. I feel judgment. I will go to rebuking in here. I've said this before, but y'all think God can speak through a donkey in a burning bush, but he can't bring me my wife through tinder? So anyway, I told her on our first date, there was one promise I know I could make, that there would never be a dull moment. And I have held that promise true. I was a talker, and she's definitely not. I was a run-the-roads kind of guy, and she was a stay-at-home and watch old Hallmark movies kind of girl, but I love this woman. Still do. I know now that love that I had formed too quickly for another woman, for another person, had become an idol. If she was good, I was good. But if she won't, I won't. I was still riding the wave of acceptance. And in a very short amount of time, I had put Tori in a totally unattainable position of God. She was now God in my life. She was who I looked to for affirmation. Her love for me, because people are human, people get upset. So if she was upset, I didn't feel loved anymore. If she was happy, I felt loved. That's not sustainable at all. The people in your classes at school, you cannot base your self-identity on how anybody else in this world treats you. Because just like you, they're human. You can't guarantee that you're going to treat another person perfect every day. But I can guarantee you God will.
Yeah. Yes.
He's the only thing from start to finish in this story that has stayed consistent. He is faithful, and he just keeps on being faithful. Every time I fall, he's there. Every time I lack, he supplies.
Yeah.
We got married on March 6, 2015, and soon following we found out we were pregnant with identical twins. Y'all have probably seen them. Case and Keenan are 6 now. We were ecstatic. You couldn't wipe a smile off my face with a Louisville Slugger, son. I was happy for it. But then, like most twin pregnancies, the boys decided to show up to the party a little early. And while they were doing the C-section, emergency C-section on Tori, Tori's face began going pale and things started beeping. On the monitor, I watched her fever skyrocket. And all of a sudden, panic set in the room. Usually twins are born about 5 minutes apart. You know, they do the whole thing where they take the baby out, the dad cuts the cord, you weigh it and take a picture, and it's pretty relaxed, honestly. I mean, she ain't feeling nothing. You know what I mean? My boys were born about 10 to 11 seconds apart. And it was literally like, baby A, welcome to the world, snip, gone. Baby B, welcome to the world, snip, gone. And I'm sitting here like, what is happening? So here I am, I found myself in a position where I was on an emotional high. I was about to meet my 2 little boys, right? And my world crashed. Now both of my babies are in NICU, and then my wife's in the ICU room. Wait a minute, what is happening here? So that emotional wave that I was riding, because I wasn't rooted in who God tells me I am. When that failed, I failed. And before long, I relapsed. After about 8.5 years of sobriety, serving God. I found myself at a party one night with some friends and was offered a line of cocaine. And without hesitation, I did it. It finally came out that I was using after we had lost our house, moved in with her parents. I was 130 pounds, 134 pounds the day I checked myself in the rehab. I remember one time I went about 2 weeks without sleeping or eating. Hallucinating. Talking to people that weren't there. That sounds really drastic, doesn't it? Y'all can say yes, I know it does. That came from rejection. That season of my life was birthed from the rejection, same kind of rejection that you kids face. So one of my challenges to you guys is, don't go through the seasons that I had to go through to figure out that God is the cure. Yeah. That a relationship with your Lord and Savior Jesus Christ is what will sustain you. Yeah. Be smarter than the last generation that didn't learn from their parents. Amen. Learn for yourself. Pick up some of these seeds and tidbits that people like me are trying to speak over this generation and actually use them. So that our next generation of children don't have to go through this again. It looked like the devil had won. My wife and I were separated. Katie had lost all trust in me. Everybody had. Went to rehab at Bethel, Colony of Mercy in the mountains in Lenore, North Carolina. I actually went twice. I left there on a spiritual high the first time, full of pride, telling myself I got this, right? It didn't take long for me to relapse, for me to use again. And long story short, I went back. This place that I went is about the equivalent of 2 semesters of Bible college in 65 days. It was incredible. It's the best thing I've ever done in my life. And in between the first time and the second time that I went, I OD'd a couple of times. And one time sticks out. I was in my car in the back of a parking lot somewhere in Fuquay on FaceTime with my wife. Just a mess, crying, life in shambles. And I went into a cocaine seizure. My wife witnessed it. I almost died. A few days after that, been up for quite a few days. And I won't ever forget, I was in the Lowe's parking lot in Clayton. And I was supposed to be at work that morning, right? Anybody that's been in addiction will understand that. And it was 5:30, it was still dark outside, and I was sitting in that parking lot, again, in shambles. And this is something that I pray not a single person in this room ever has to deal with or feel the feeling that is associated with this. But I genuinely felt that the only thing I could ever do good for my family was to take myself away from them. And sitting in that parking lot, I pulled a knife out of my pocket. And I held it up to my wrist. And I was sitting there trying to get the courage up to do it. And for 3 years now, I've tried to get a way to explain this and do it justice, but the sun broke over those trees, and the sunlight came through that windshield, and the glory of God hit my forehead and lit up the inside of that car. And it was like the prodigal son in the word where he talks about he came to himself. And it was like I just woke up. And I dropped that knife. And I'd love to tell you that life was great after that, right? But it wasn't. Sorry guys, I got a tickle in my throat. About 2 or 3 days after that, car that I was driving, I flipped it, going through a curve in the backside of Andrew. Don't tell me how, but I landed on the wheels. I literally rolled the car over an embankment in the air. And you know those little metal tie-down things that are on telephone poles? I literally flipped the car, and that tie-down hit my door and set my car down. And as I was sliding back and holding the steering wheel, just like, I looked down, and that knife that I had dropped 3 days earlier was sitting in my lap. And I thought to myself, I hear you, God. So I went back to Bethel. That was the second time that I went. The day that I walked into this place, I will never do justice with my testimony without mentioning this man. There was a little tiny man at Bethel named Pastor Richie. He's 90 years old, 91 now. And he's about 5 foot nothing. Man, that's a mountain of a man right there, y'all. Not talking about me. I walked in there that day and he walked up to me and said, "You're mine," and just weirdly walks away. Okay, you know what I mean? And it started kind of slow. He would come and grab me and take me up to his office and just ask me question after question about, you know, what was your childhood like, your parents, what do you like to do? It's like I was in an interview all the time. Give you a little backstory to Pastor Richie. He had a multi-million-dollar engineering firm, and he was the local pastor for a homeless shelter in the area. And one day, God told him to sell everything that he owned and be the pastor at an addiction facility. And he did. Sorry, guys. This is terrible. Is it as bad for y'all as it is for me? I don't know who's more uncomfortable about me coughing, you or me. But he was one of those men. God told him to do something really drastic, and he did it. Right? And now I'm sitting across from this guy day to day, and he's telling me to do the same. Forget everything you've ever known. Forget who you thought you were. Leave all that behind. One night at the altar at Bethel, no different than some of the nights you guys had, I had an experience, and by this time I hadn't talked to my wife or seen my children in months. I was just really honestly just begging God to help me, begging for some sense of peace. And God finally spoke to me. And that's clear as day. They are my children first. She is my daughter before she's your wife. Let go. And that night on that altar, I surrendered my husband, my wife, and my children to God. And I didn't realize it at the time, but it started a move of God in my life. A few days after that, Pastor Richie called me into his office one morning and said, "You ready to get rid of some things?" I was like, I don't know. No idea what you're talking about. He pulled me in his office, and I sat in that office with him for 12 hours straight that day. No water, no food, no getting up to go to the bathroom. Sounds crazy, but it didn't feel like 12 hours. And the best way that I've come to realize that I can describe this is that sometimes I felt like he was talking to me, and sometimes I felt like he was talking to something inside of me. And he just sat there and spoke the goodness of God over my life, healing over my life for 12 hours. And before long, can't really find exactly the words to tell you, but it was like I was that 7-year-old kid again. I could smell that closet. I could feel cramped like I was in the dog crate again. And after a little while, it was gone. I didn't feel it no more. But at the same time, that need for affirmation left. The need for acceptance left. And I honestly believe that that was the day that I was delivered from the pain I went through as a child. I don't care what somebody else thinks about me no more. I care about serving God. I care about, in a healthy way, my children and my wife. I care about honoring them. But if somebody don't like me, hey, that's y'all lost. You know? That day, every bit of pain that I went through as a child got broke. All my jealous nature was broken. The need for constant affirmation left. So I felt God telling me to stay at Bethel. I didn't have to stay because I had went once. I didn't have to stay for 30 days. I ended up staying about 7 months. And learned how to mentor other kids, other guys going through what I had went through. And I see now that God was using this to prepare Tori to work on herself, her recovery. See, God had began a plan a long time ago, months prior, when Tori was pregnant with our youngest, Valley. There was a man in the hospital, and Tori was his ICU nurse. And that man's daughter began speaking life over Tori the day she was there. And there was a connection. You know, y'all may know her. Her name's Amanda Bird. She's right back there. Good look at his phone, man. But because of that connection, Tori began reaching out. She began to seek out what addiction actually was and what recovery meant. And through all of it, she found one main thing: hope. She saw success stories. Finally, the voice of the devil in her head that he'll never be the man you need him to be. He'll never get clean. He'll never be sober. He'll never love you. Began to be silenced, and some of these other things were spoke over her life. And things began to change. And I was still up at Bethel, and up until this point, Tori had never made a phone call to me. Rightfully so. But one day after coming back from the campus from working, I had a message from the office to call my wife. And I was like, I trucked it to that payphone. We started talking, and slowly we decided to put the weapons down. And eventually we started to fight for each other instead of fighting against each other. And we've been together ever since. I left Bethel eventually, and we got an apartment together in Garner, and I was staying at home with kids every day, and on the weekends she was working, and I was going crazy, honestly. So I made a call to an old friend. His name is Lee Flack. I work for him now, started working for him, and been there 3 years now. I'm actually, God's restored things in my professional life. I'm their operations manager now. He's done so many things since surrender happened. But for the first time, I was actually working recovery. See, a lot of times we think that just because you go through something and you surrender it, oh, we're good, we're done, we don't have to mess with that anymore. But that's not true. We surrender it. The surrender is one part. Walking it out is a whole different part. Yeah. Trials and temptations are going to continue to come. Surrender is the main part. That's dying to yourself. But that's a daily thing. It continues. See, now I do a little bit of different form of dropping. I drop my recovery meetings on Friday nights. I drop all the self-pity and the boo-hoo and the woe me. And most importantly, I drop to my knees when I need to. So why did I start this thing out? Some of y'all probably wondering, like, where did Mephibosheth go? Y'all been trying to pronounce that name. Y'all tell the truth. In y'all's head, y'all been trying to pronounce that name the whole time. Mephibosheth. It sounds kind of hood, don't it? Mephibosheth. Because I relate to him, right? After being dropped as a child, he lived many, many years. He was older. Hiding in total shame. And he lived in this place called Lodabar, right? So Lodabar in the Greek means the land of no communication. Remember, I talk a lot, but I never communicate. Or no sustenance. It means there was nothing actually there. Yeah, y'all can come on up here a little bit. Until, the word says, until someone called him. So 5 chapters after we learned of him being dropped, in chapter 9, Mephibosheth is called. Verse 1 said, now David said, is there anyone left of the house of Saul that I may show Hassan for Jonathan's sake? That's one of those words when y'all read it, when you're reading the Old Testament, that y'all be like, or you might even skip. Y'all remember, who does this? Y'all come across a word in the Old Testament and you just go, that guy? Or you just skip it, or you go, I still do it. I still do it. But the Greek for Hassan means the loving kindness of God. So one of Saul's old servants still worked there, and he was like, there actually is somebody, but you don't want him. His feet jacked up. Something wrong with him. Can we have like an honest moment? Who in here has ever really thought, maybe there's something wrong with me? Yeah. Not everybody has to go through the depth of pain that I went through to feel like something's wrong with them. Not everybody's going to have to experience the pain of the childhood that I had to feel rejected or abandoned. Not everybody feels worthless or has to go through an addiction to feel worthless. Society will push you young kids toward that nowadays. But what did David do? David said, actually, you know what? Go get him so that I can show him the love of God. So David brought him back anyway. And can you imagine like what Mephibosheth was thinking at the time? They come knocking on his door, right? And the word actually says that he's living in somebody else's house. Dude's homeless, broke legs. Life ain't great, right? Can you imagine what he thought when they knocked on the door and said, hey man, King looking for you. So all these years he's been in this place called Lodabar, thinking that the king is looking for him to kill him, right? And he's like, man, it's over. They finally got him. So they pick him up and carry him. They take him back to David. And this is how much self-worth Mephibosheth had when he got in front of David. He's like, I don't know why you wanted me. He actually referred to himself as a dead dog. See, in this story, yes, I relate to Mephibosheth, but there's a big time parallel in this story that if you can grasp this will show you the character of God. And he's so incredibly intelligent. He tells these stories. He's the only thing that's ever written history in advance. It's a foreshadowing of what Jesus was to us, is to us. See, David is showing the love to a person that sees that he's not worthy of anything by and through the covenant he made with Jonathan. In this story, David is a picture-perfect example of who God is, and Jonathan represents Jesus. Here's the cool thing that stuck out about this story to me. Dude's legs are broke, y'all. We are meant to be a community. How y'all think old boy got back to David in the first place? Did he walk? He definitely didn't take an Uber. He was carried. The people you surround yourself with matter. They can either leave you lonely, feeling like a dead dog, or they can help carry you to the king. See, he had forgotten his lineage. He had forgotten who he was. He had given up. Anybody ever feel like that? Am I the only one? We all are born with a name and an inheritance. And it's up to us if we're going to believe the lies that the devil whispers to us, or to call us ourselves, speak life over ourselves, and love ourselves the way he loves us. The second part of that is the inheritance. It said not only, when I went to Bethel, when I came home, all I wanted was some peace, right? My life was crazy. I was on medications. I was on all kinds of stuff, guys. And when I came home, I gained just a little bit of peace, and that's really all I wanted. That night when I surrendered my life and my children and my wife, I just wanted some peace. What did Mephibosheth get when he went back and met the king? He was shown the loving kindness of God. Yes. David said, you're not a dead dog. In fact, I'm going to restore to you everything that your grandfather, King Saul, owned. So this broken man now has all the fields that was taken from him, all the cattle, all the servants, everything that was rightfully his was restored just by being in the presence of the king. Then he takes it a step further. He says, and on top of that, you're going to eat at the king's table from now on. This man used to eat the scraps of people he didn't even know. And now he's sitting at the king's table. Let me tell you something, y'all. I ain't all there. I ain't got it all right. But that woman sitting right back there and those children that know their daddy by name is my king's table. He has restored what I destroyed. I know a lot of nights y'all come in here and the world is the world, right? Y'all checking Instagram, seeing who's dating who. But if we're getting really honest, in those quiet moments when we're by ourselves, when your phone dies, when it's dark at night and you're in your bedroom and all you have is you and your thoughts, y'all feel the same way I did at times. There's an inheritance waiting for you. If y'all have had those feelings of loneliness, if y'all have had those feelings of self-worth issues or doubt, they're about to play a song, and can we just have a moment, not like the beginning of this worship. It doesn't have to be about the song. It's about you and God. Where y'all come to the altar. Surround the next person that comes to the altar. Pray over each other. The word says to admonish each other in the Lord. Lift up these kids around you, your friends around you. If it's not for you, come for them. Encourage one another. But I tell you what, if you want anything to change in your life, things to be better, peace to be prevalent, it will not happen sitting in your seat you're in. It takes action. It takes standing up, and stepping out in faith, and coming and having a true, honest moment with God. Who's going to be the first person to step out in faith?